welcome to FACEHAMMER. It's me, Russ the Face. I'm joined by Byron, Series D Ord.
All right, I'll take that.
Yeah.
Byron, unlike the unlikely ally, like Kairos.
Kairos. I can't tell you get upset. We thought we would do yet another Slaanesh show. I know everyone's loving it at the moment. But we've been deep diving into the book since we've recorded and listening to comments and feedback and list crafting, and we've come to some differences from the show and some different opinions, and we figured we would share some of that as content. So we've done a video on Sigvald, so check that out, and if you want to know about the first deep dive, you can go check that out. There'll be a link in the description. There's also a competition on that video. If you haven't entered it, then you can go on there and post a Slaanesh army list, and why you've taken the stuff, and why it's cool, and then we will pick the winner. And when we do our Daughters of Cain follow-up show, we will announce the winner there. So you've got a little bit of time, so get on it if you haven't done it already.
Absolutely, do something creative. I'd love to see some weird and wacky stuff. We've been working out our own. Safe to say that we've both gone through pretty much exactly the same 4 or so waves of what we think a list should be. Obviously you could do whatever you like, but we've changed our opinion several times, pretty much in sync, haven't we? Yeah,
it's been a bit strange because we've almost like come to the same conclusions at the same time independently, and then when we come to talk,
I'm thinking of this. Here's the one that I just wrote today.
It's been a little bit unusual, but also quite good that you're getting that reinforcement that someone else is also saying the same thing. So you're like,
I think I'm 50% less worried that I'm mad now, so we're all good.
Still like 60% of the time mad all the time.
Where do we start then? This is going to be a deep dive on Depravity, which is obviously pretty much the backbone of the book and the unique thing about the book. And I think we start off with just explaining what it is and how it works. I think there are some nuances with Depravity that is very easy to overlook until you play a game or two, and then you go, oh right, yeah. Not that I've played a game, but it's it's one of those things that you can we kind of come to the same conclusion after thinking about game, because we're still down over. It's a planning ahead army, right? Like things happen with this army a turn later than you would potentially have with other armies. That's got some real pluses, it's got some minuses, but you definitely need to plan for it and be aware of it so you don't get caught out by your own list. And
so the Feast of Depravity special rule is the allegiance, so you have to be allegiance Slaanesh for this. So if you're playing Slaves to Darkness allegiance, you don't get this, so you have to play Slaanesh. So you can summon Slaanesh demon units to the battlefield if you have enough DP or Depravity points. At the end of the battle shock phase, you receive 1 Depravity point for each unit on the battlefield that had a wound or mortal wound that was not negated allocated to it in that turn, or has fewer models than it had at the start of that turn.
Okay. One point here that we have realised about spells and how things work is that you can have healed a wound, because a heal isn't a negation, and you will still get the Depravity from that. So if you want to send a Burning Head to the left through 4 of your units and then heal some stuff with a Life Swarm or another ability, as long as that ability doesn't say do so at the start of the hero phase, you can heal it, and that interaction will result in you having a unit that has taken no damage but generates your Depravity, which is pretty tasty and feels cool and quite Slaanesh-y.
And just from a gaming point of view, I would have some tokens that as stuff gets killed or takes damage is just to mark those units each turn, and then at the end you collect those tokens up, and that's your Depravity that you add to your total. I think that's probably the
something super bright so you don't forget it.
I'm sure if you go over to Pro Painted and hit up Matt Leons, would be happy to make you some super bright neon counters. He's been kind enough to send me some blip counters for my Gene Stealer cults, so he's super awesome. So he'll do custom stuff, so you can check him out. We'll put a link in the description, so
definitely
go check out his stuff.
Go to Matt Leons for some DP.
Yeah, get your depravity from Matt, which I do quite often.
I've been getting my depravity from Matt before I even met him, so that's like a decade and counting.
So that's how you get the points. Now, just so you know, it's at the end of the battle shock phase, you get them. So the unit still has to be on the battlefield. So if you wipe a unit out or it runs away, you don't get the points, because at the end of the battle shock phase they're not there.
Has to be something there to count.
Yeah, so you only get them if the unit's still on the table. Now it is interesting because it's both players' turns, so it's their turn and your turn, which when we talk about timing, that's going to be quite a big factor in who goes first.
Yeah, it's huge. You can scare people with this as well. You know, you can tell them how it works and educate them, and then they have to make a decision whether they want to potentially run into some of your units, do you some damage, but put you in a position where you could have an extremely heavy turn 2 summoning, or maybe even if things have gone particularly badly or well, depending on how you look at it, whether there's been lots of damage on either side, you might be able to pop a unit out turn 1 or something.
Yeah, exactly. So then the second part of this is if you have depravity at the end of your movement phase. So obviously in your first turn, if you're going first, you won't have any at this point. You'll get them at the end of the turn. But if your opponent's had a turn and they've done damage to you, you might have some. So that's where the difference comes in.
Worth considering.
You can summon one unit, so you can't do multiple units from a table.
It doesn't wipe out your points though, does it? Your points are a running tally. So if you've had 10 points and you spent 6, you don't go down to 0 again, which I believe is, there has been some summoning. Maybe the Khorne worked like that.
I think Nurgle as well.
Yeah.
I think Nurgle you reset to 0. Definitely with Blood Tithe you do. So you can only summon a unit if you've got enough to do so, and it must be set wholly within 12 of a hero, 9 away from enemy units, but also within 12 of the Thane. It's got its own. It counts as a hero technically for summoning points. So the Thane of Slaanesh gives you a buff to that as well. Now I believe it used to refund you depravity if you summon near it, but I think that's gone. I will quickly check that, just because I haven't, as we're doing this live, and
that's good. There's a couple of hosts. There's a couple of hosts that give you bonuses to depravity generation as well. I believe it might be Godseekers.
They all give you a depravity bonus. They do it in different ways. So the Thane, this might be the old rules. That's the old scroll. The website's out of date. Email GW. I'm going live to the book.
Me too. What is it? What page is it on?
It'll be secretly hidden away between Path to Glory allegiances and War Scrolls.
I tried to find this the other day and gave up, but I am
because it's normally tucked in a really
88
weird place.
88. Sick.
Yeah. So I don't think you get any depravity back. No, you don't. So the War Scroll on the website's out of date, so don't use that. Ignore me. No, you don't. You used to. It was there. See proof. Yeah, but then you've got your different hosts. So when you play Slaanesh, you've got Invaders, Pretenders, and Godseekers. So Invaders, you get a point if your generals is in their territory. So if you're playing Lurid Haze using Sigvold shenanigans, fairly easy to get that on turn 1.
Otherwise quite difficult, right?
Yeah, quite hard. If you've got 3 generals, you can have up to 3, and all 3 of them are in enemy territory, you get D3. Probably never ever going to come up.
No,
even if
not
you get
worth
D3, you might
risking that much.
So either. I don't think it's ever going to happen, so I wouldn't worry about that.
Agreed.
I believe Pretenders you get when you're within an inch of an enemy unit, or within 3 of an enemy unit with your general. So it's when he's in combat at the end of the battle shock phase. So you get a point. And if he's within 3 of, I think, 3 units, you get D3 points.
Well done.
Off the top of my head, just like that. And then Godseekers is you get, if your general makes a charge. And then I think you get D3 if you make a charge against multiple units, I think. If you finish
at the end of your charge phase, you receive D3 depravity points if your general made a charge move in the same turn, Add 1 to the roll if any other Godseeker's units made a charged move in that turn. So that's quite reliable, that one.
Yeah. So, yeah. So the ways you can get depravity from the hosts, basically. And if you go to the Wrath of the Everchosen and you take a Grand Host upgrade, whatever they're called, you still get those rules. You're still an Invaders or a Pretenders or a Godseeker's host. You've just got an extra layer on top, and it doesn't negate those rules, so you still get that.
We have particular love for the Lurid Haze, don't we?
Yeah, it's Invaders for me, and they've always been the one I've liked the most anyway. So I know that Pretenders were pretty popular, but they were just, pretending to be the best, and they actually are the best. So, and also, like, yeah, I know there is a host of Shalesk in a White Dwarf, but that affects depravity. But I believe that is out of date now because depravity's changed, and I don't know if it's been updated. It hasn't yet. It might be. If it does get updated, we will talk about it on another show. But in this show, we're not going to cover it because at the moment that White Dwarf allegiance doesn't look like it works the same way. So we'll just move on. But it does exist. So I'm sure someone will tell us about it in the comments. So that'd be awesome. If anything does change or anything gets published, I will post a pinned comment that will take you there so you can check it yourself, but we're not going to discuss it in depth on this show because we don't know. So that's that one. So it's good probably to look at the chart and
yeah, page 79. This is going to be your Bible.
It's looking at this and looking what you can summon. Obviously it's only demons. There's quite a big list there. And what we thought we'd do, we'd talk about the options of what you can summon. Actually, probably before we get into that, we probably need to talk about this timing, don't we, and list design and things like that, because it's maybe more conceptually before we get into it, but it's
I tried to sum this up with this easy to follow chart.
All I can see is bodies and speed next to your head, which I think is like the
Slaanesh mantra.
That was your like
That's my weekend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So one of the things I thought we'd probably talk about, so we talked about in the last show about summoning your keeper, and all the lists that we featured didn't have a keeper of secrets. He's quite expensive. He's 12. Now the problem is, if you think that you'd have to have 4 depravity a turn for 3 turns, then you could summon him on the 3rd turn.
Yeah, that's your and your opponent's phases being included.
I think you'd be very lucky to get him in turn 2 unless your opponent's double turned you.
Yeah.
And if they've double turned you, you might not have any heroes or models left. So it's
just no. Like Russ and I, if we're writing a list that needs a keeper, it's in the list.
Yeah,
basically at this point,
you're losing out the magic phase. You're losing out the ability to give it traits and artifacts. You're losing out the fact that you're relying on that command ability.
You're not affecting the board for 3 turns with a core part of your army. You're not putting down something that generates more depravity. Like by the time you get to turn 5, the equity you've lost by not putting a keeper in your army, I think, is literally, you could have lost. It sounds a bit extreme, but you could have lost multiple of your games, like a third of your games, because of the little sneaky things that didn't happen or you didn't get as an option.
I think the reliable locus, the command ability is too powerful not to have in your list. Points per effectiveness, he's actually one of the things that's reasonably cost in the army, whereas a lot of the other things in the book are overcosted.
Customizable, heavily customizable.
He's the only thing that you really want to be putting artifacts and traits on because he's not named and he's good. So basically, he's going to be tooled up. It's just, I think the more I think about it, the more a keeper starts on the table. It doesn't mean you won't summon one later or get a second one or replenish your keeper when he's died, but I think if you want any of the stuff the keeper brings, you need to put him in your army list.
Yes, I completely agreed. And so my governing decisions behind this are kind of the most important turns of the game are the first ones, because they're the only ones that you're guaranteed to actually have. The game could end early. You could get killed before you got to do anything. You could kill your opponent before you got to do anything. You can't summon turn 1 unless stuff really, really goes your way, but that might also involve your army being half wiped out. So maybe it didn't go your way. So
yeah, that relies on your opponent going first and pinging off all your units, but not killing them.
Absolutely. If you're summoning in the late turns of the game, you're going to be probably dropping things to score objectives, I imagine, if you're doing anything like that. So what you do in turns 2 and 3, particularly 2 and 3, is really, really, really important with Depravity, I think. And you don't want to be saving up for something that you might get to drop. You don't get the priority roll, and then it actually happens tail of N3 when you've potentially won or lost the game already.
Yeah, and I think the chart itself, if you think about like how you generate points, you generate when you take damage and when they take damage. When you write your army list, there are some things you need to think about. So we talked about the Keeper of Secrets, and I think it's important. The other thing is ranged threat.
There's none of that on that list, is one thing to note.
Yeah. Well,
you can't summon archers, really.
The only thing you can summon is the Enrapturous, which has a ranged attack. But yeah, technically not really anything there. Now, the point is that ranged damage will potentially allow you to generate more Depravity early game. So either that or stuff that can go into combat, take a little bit of damage and survive and deal damage in that turn, because you get a double point. So if you go in and hit someone but don't kill it, and then you get hit back and you don't die, that's 2 points. So you're going to be capped by how many units you have for your max potential for you. Now, your opponent, you don't know what they're going to bring, so it's not in your control. But if you want to rely on Depravity, you want to, what they used to call MSU, your army, which is many small units. And I think you're very unlikely to take anything other than minimum size units of any unit in a Slaanesh army, except maybe a Anvil of Chaos Warriors or a blob of combat units like Fiends, because they get an inherent bonus, which makes them better at generating Depravity anyway, or maybe Twin Souls or Myrmidons. But even then,
if you're doing that, you spend...
So
yeah, even if you're doing that, you spent 400 points on 10 dudes, which is quite an investment anyway.
Really, I think you're still better off rolling Twin Souls in 5s. You do have an argument that you get one unit to boost with a command ability to go twice, or attack bonus, or a reroll to wound bonus. But actually, I think you're better off going into debuffing your opponent and taking MSU. So one of the first things I would do is avoid any large units doubling up sizes. So there's no point taking 10 Hellstriders. You might as well take 2 5s. Now, there does have considerations with who goes first and things like that. But basically, for me, taking multiple small units is better than taking a couple big blobs.
Yeah.
Just the way it works.
There's some formations that let you do this and keep your drop slow, but I've not been putting formations in frequently at all in the list that I've been writing Slaanesh. Doesn't mean they're bad, but the list that I've been writing have barely included formations. Couple of exceptions to
personally
cool bonuses.
Think the only formation worth that I would consider, I mean, there are others that are good, but I think this one is standout, and that is the Seeker Cavalcade.
Yeah, agreed.
Because basically you can put any Seeker, Blissbarb Seeker, Hellstrider, Slickblade Seekers, up to 6 units of them, and they get a very effective rule, which is they can pile in within 6 instead of 3 and move an extra 3 inches. Yep. So it allows you to have a turn where they all just run and they just pile in and fight before, and then your opponent, you're going to get to hit everything before they hit you. So for Depravity generation, that's really good. And then if they hit you back, particularly if you've been clever with your pilings, your reaches, your locusts, Hell Scourges, where they get -1 to hit on the charge.
You just take 1 or 2 wounds, which is what you want anyway.
Although you're not technically charging if you use the piling, but if you charged in with them, for example, and activated them first, then they're going to be like -2 to hit you if you've got Glutus as well within range. And there's lots of stuff you can do with defense, which we've talked about a lot on the other show. We've talked about it on the Sigvold show, so I'm not going to cover all that old ground, but basically any unit that you can make survive a round of combat and inflict damage is going to probably give you 2 Depravity. You've also got the
power to split your attacks. So as a formation, Seeker Cavalcade, I think for Depravity generation is very good.
Yeah. There's one alright one in the other book, which gives you +1 to wound and is 120 points, but involves you taking a lot of Demonette units, which is quite restrictive in of itself. So up to 2 to 3 heroes and up to 6 Demonesh units, 120 points, which could get you down to like a 3-drop in terms of other stuff you're including. But again, I think it feels like you're stretching a little bit, and you could just spend those points on dudes when you want loads of dudes anyway, or loads of units.
Yeah, and I think for me, Demonettes are one of the weaker choices in the book. I don't really want to take them if I can. I'm really not a fan. Someone might tell me I'm wrong, but that's just my opinion.
I think it's good to have a few for summoning purposes.
Yeah, but I wouldn't start with them on the table, is what I'm saying. I
Agreed.
wouldn't pay for them. I don't mind free ones, but I don't want to pay for them.
Agreed, yeah.
If it's free, I'll have another one. But so for me, you've got the other one is the Depraved Carnival, which you might take. It's quite heavy on tax because you've got to take 3 Lords of Pains or Shard Speakers, then 3 of Blissbarb Archers. You have to shoot in the hero phase, but they're only 18-inch range, and the big strength of Blissbarb Archers, they get to run and shoot. But if you do it in your hero phase, they've got to already be within 18 of you. They're quite low bravery and quite squishy, so I don't think you'll get that chance very often.
No, and if it was one unit, you'd probably want that unit to be a 10, which is awkward and points heavy and goes against kind of how you'd run the army, Jim. Oh, sorry, yeah, 20.
Yeah, so the 22, I should say, because you'd have double homunculi, but
yeah. But that's a pretty big investment and a very squishy unit, so it kind of goes against the themes that I've been putting into my lists anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like the Exalted Speed Knights, maybe, because you get a pre-game move, so that might be useful if you want to get the table, but it's with units that are so stupidly quick, you probably don't need that anyway. So
agreed.
So again, I don't think the formations are much to go. The Seeker Cavalcade's a little bit different because of the Depravity generation, particularly if you're in God Seekers. I think it's quite good for that. But when you write your army list, you need to think about this, and one of the things that I think is super important is to get some shooting in your list.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is you get to get Depravity on turn 1 without having to make a charge, although you've got units that are capable of doing it. And what's good about shooting is you can split your fire and try and hit multiple enemy units and do 1 wound, 2 wounds, and just take the Depravity and know that you're not killing their screen, but what you are doing is you're just generating those points for later in the game. So. And I think as Blissbarb Archers, we talked about this a lot because we talked about Blissbarb Seekers on the show, and I was a bit of a fan, and I've kind of gone off them now.
They've got multiple wounds, which is nice, so they can get somewhere fast, run and shoot. Maybe get into combat, get hit, hold something up. You can make long screens with them, but in terms of the amount of wounds that the units output, the cheaper unit of the Archers on foot, they get through exactly twice as many wounds as the others for less points with more bodies. And I've ended up prioritizing them as a result of that, and then swapping the other guys or downgrading them in terms of spending less points and putting in things like Seekers, just plain Seekers.
Yeah. I actually think even if you want to upscale them to Slick Blade Seekers, you could do a lot worse. I think for me, like the Vectors of Agony sounds really good, but actually I wish it was in addition or on the hit roll, because on the wound roll it doesn't come in very often because you only got 15 dice. So even if you hit with everything and they only hit on a 4, which is the real pain.
Whereas the other units, the little weirdo buffs them, doesn't he?
He gets a +1 to wound, so they're 4s and 3s, I believe. So
yeah.
And obviously things like the Contorted Epitome using Acquiescence allows you to reroll 1s to hit, so that any Acquiescence spell will allow you to reroll 1s to hit. But they're a lot shorter range, 18-inch range. So if you can get that spell off, that's good because you're more likely to do a wound if you're shooting.
The difference is between it's 8 wounds for the guys on foot and 4 wounds for the guys on steeds, ish, roughly, which is a big difference.
Yeah, huge. Yeah, huge.
Yeah.
And I think you're probably better off having the foot unit because it's battle line as well. I mean, they're 160 points, so it's kind of feel a bit expensive, but if you hit 2 units to get double Depravity, and then every turn you're able to
ping a couple units and get some depravity points and they die, they're going to be sat at the back on objectives anyway. You kind of got to leave units back, so you might as well have a unit back that can shoot and do something.
Exactly. Yeah, completely. And just having shooting, just having a more varied list is a good thing. You don't have Slaanesh isn't particularly resilient naturally. It is if you build around that, and you could end up with a quite dimensional army if all it does is run really fast, hit things hard, and die quick. So it's sounds like my type of list.
I don't know what you're talking about. I found some fun to me. But like from a shooting point of view, you've got those 2 mortal units. There is another option, which is the Enrapturous.
Not a bad option.
She's good, but in terms of shooting, I think she's not super reliable. So she's got 2 different ways to do it. Excuse me. 6 attacks, which you can have at 18-inch range, or 1 at 24. So you've got one that's rend free, damage D3, hits on a 2, wounds on a 3, but it's only 1 single dice, and the other one is 6 attacks, freeze, falls, rend 1, damage 1. So depending on what you're trying to do, she's not bad. Like honestly, I think she's a good option. I think to take her in your list, like to start your army, is probably not a good idea.
No, and with you only having 4 effective turns of summoning or 3, arguably it feels like it'd be a bit of a stretch to be summoning her.
She's
maybe if you wanted
50 points, so it's quite an investment, and she's only a 7 to summon, so you might get to the stage where you're like on turn 1 you've got 7 points and you're thinking next turn I'm going to gain like 20 because there's so much is going to happen. Then you're like, well, you might as well plop her on the table.
She's if you're facing a lot of magic as well, she's a good option, right?
Yeah, because she's disruptive, so I think she's a decent summoning option. But I think essentially, before we get into the individual units, what we're saying is there's 2 ways to generate. 1, you take damage, and 2, you dish it out. So you can dish it out in combat or shooting or magic, and you can then obviously take damage just however you want to take it, because any way you want. But the point is that's in your opponent's control to a certain extent. And I think what you can do is you can force them to do damage to you in combat because they have to fight.
Yes.
And with your pile-ins and that's why I really lean on the defensive abilities like Glutos is -1, your command abilities where you ignore the first 2 wounds will give you +1 save, or like Chaos Warriors are really good because they got a 5-up mortal save, but you don't have to take it, it's optional. They get a rerollable save, you've got a big unit, and you can know they're not going to die. And that's why I quite like the Seekers, especially the Slick Blades, because they've got it's 20 wounds in the unit.
4 wounds a model, isn't it? It's pretty
fast.
Cool.
Yeah, it's good. And then even Fiends, -1 to hit, -1 to wound if you've got 6 of them. So anything that's defensive. I mean, we talked about Sigvold, he's defensive. He can be with Lurid Haze. You can get units in their deployment zone in combat turn 1. So you are getting depravity multiple ways, even going in and splitting your attacks intentionally not to kill anything.
Yeah.
You
if you don't think you're going to die, or you might be just you could know that you're not going to take too many wounds. You're going to do some wounds to a couple of things. You might kill one of them by accident. Not a bad accident to have. In which case you can target the other one next turn, or best case scenario, you damage both of them a fair bit, nearly kill them, then you wipe them out in your opponent's next turn or something like that. Then you get the freedom to charge and rock on again.
And I think things like having the keeper on the table and then having the mirrors is really strong, because you can do stuff like cacophonic choir through the mirror.
Yeah.
And what it does, it hits everything within 6, and they take D3 mortal wounds if the roll that you use to cast it is higher than their bravery. Oh, so roll 2d6 if you roll higher than their bravery.
There's a fair bit of minus bravery available in little bits and bobs throughout the book as well.
Yeah.
You've got one of the spells buffs Slaanesh bravery by 1 within range, and debuffs opponent's bravery by 1 within range. Archeon also, but that ends up being very expensive. He does debuffs people by 2. If CAC had a better range, I would be trying to write some weird janky lists around it, because I think it's pretty cool.
But if you're using the mirrors, you could potentially hit multiple units with that.
stops people from bunching as well, which is, you know, if they've got a bubble plan, it really punishes them for that.
And obviously, if you've got the mirrors, what you can do with the mirrors as well, which people probably don't realise, it's the first successful spell you put through. So you can try to put multiple things through, force them to unbind or do other things, and then that's what I used to do with Subvert and Stupefy and Hysterical Frenzy. I used to have all 3 wizards within 1 inch of the mirrors, and all 3 wizards would try a different spell, and if they got and I'd prioritise the order by best to worst, and if it went off, then I'd be like, right, that's going through the mirror. You see, then you can do it that way. So
plenty of great second options available. You know, +1 rerolling ones to hit. There's too many.
I mean, you got like the -1 to wound one debuff spell. You've got like even Hysterical Frenzy. It's really good. You got Purveying if you just want to ping a wound off. You can even do Bolt. I mean, if you're just trying to get Depravity, I mean, a bolt through a mirror, if that's the only thing you got left to cast and you can put it through the mirror, you might as well. I mean,
dropping on the endless spells isn't a bad option either.
Yeah, and as I say, like anything that does AoE damage is a really good, and even like some of the Slaanesh endless spells, the only thing about they're only going to affect on the turn that they come on, because subsequent turns they're happening between battle rounds. So it's before people have a turn. So if you've got like Wheels of Excruciation being moved into the next turn, that's not doing damage in the turn, so you're not going to generate Depravity from it.
Okay.
So it's worth thinking about that. But when you cast it, you get to activate it, you will. So it is good for that. That's a very good spell for that, because it's fast and it hits multiple things. It doesn't affect Slaanesh either, so there's no danger. Particularly, I'm sure there's a lot of really janky endless spell shenanigans you can do.
Some really techie stuff. Some of the unsubtle stuff is just to put your units in a row and put a burning head through the arse of 5 of them. Some of these units can heal, and as we've covered, that you still get the point, even if the unit's not taking any wounds. As long as it took a wound that it didn't negate, it's fine that it healed it. You could get yourself 5 very efficient points extremely fast. And then there's also some abilities in the army that mean you could get rid of the endless spell if you didn't want your opponent to have the ability to use it, which I think just feels pretty tasty.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of stuff you could do with magic. So when you're thinking about Depravity on turn 1, don't just think about range shooting. Think about ambushing with Lurid Haze. Think about spell mirrors or portals, whatever they're called, and range of spells to do damage. All those things affect the enemy units and give you points, and also endless spells, like you say, you can hit your own units. So like Burning Head gives you damage to your own units, and it also gives you I think it's reroll 1s to wound, I think, or something like that as a bonus.
You can run through terrain and stuff like that as well, can't you?
Yeah,
a load of stuff's got run and charge.
You can run through Deadly if you really wanted to. You could take your damage on your Fane, sacrifice to the Fane. So there are ways you can generate Depravity on yourself, and if you've got any way to heal. So things like Born of Damnation, Progeny of Damnation spells that heal, Life Swarm, any of that's quite strong, especially as you heal back, you still get the Depravity. As we thought you didn't, but actually reading it, you will. So that's very strong. So I think those ways to generate is important to think about. And I think for me, when I write lists, I want my army to be survivable, to not be easy to kill in a oneer, and I want to be disruptive. So looking at debuffs, janky pile-ins, stopping them piling in, going multiple times, shooting, all this sort of stuff that gives you the ability to generate Depravity. So it's all this stuff is worth considering. I wouldn't say we have touched on it. You could take the Ogroid Crusher and blow up your Fane and hit everything in your army. I would say that if you're doing that to get a unit of like 3 chariots, you're probably better off just buying the 3 chariots and not setting your army up in a big bubble and hitting yourself and do loads of damage.
You're playing it out of the strengths of the army, aren't you? It's unless you got there might be a specific build with Glutos or something, but
maybe. But I think you're almost playing. You're dictating your turn 1 to generate this arbitrary resource that isn't as important as just killing the thing. And I think that might be a trap that Slaanesh players fall into. There's
a lot of traps in the book.
Playing a game, sometimes you go, I won't want to kill that because I want to get a depravity point. It's actually, you're probably better off just killing the thing, like, because getting 1 point towards your 10 demonettes isn't really worth the effort. So I think you need to consider, do I shoot multiple things to get a couple points, or do I just make sure I kill that one buff hero dead? And sometimes you're like, I need to kill that hero dead, and if you don't kill it because you got unlucky, you still get a little silver lining bonus point, or whatever you want to call it.
Absolutely. When in doubt, what is the most annoying thing for your opponent is what I ask me. Not not what gives me some boner about doing something that I've got my headset on for a not particularly good reason, but what is the most difficult for your opponent to deal with is, generally speaking, the right answer.
Yeah, and I think from that's probably giving you guys an overview of how to get the depravity. So let's go through the units now. So what can you summon? So you've got, for 6 points, 10 demonettes, 5 seekers, 1 chariot, or a vice leader herald of Slaanesh. I think the 5 seekers are probably the one that I like the most.
Absolutely.
Just purely, if you look at what you get, you're getting the same amount of wounds as the demonettes. They're a lot faster.
A lot
faster. Potentially, they have less attacks, but the mount's got 2 attacks, so they're kind of the same.
Yeah.
So they're not really that much different. But then you get to, if you kill an enemy model, you get +1 attack in the next phase, so they get like a bonus attack. So
yeah,
I think they're just the speed, because you get the 2d6 run, and you can run and charge.
Oh, they're great.
You can re-roll charge rolls. It's just like all innate. It's just brilliant.
And when your summoning happens slightly slower than it feels like it could, that rapid move is a really good way to make up for it. They're my standout choice out of the 6s.
It allows you to put them in like a defensive position, but it's an aggressive position, but your opponent can't get to them because of that threat range. Whereas like 10 demonettes, they're quite slow in comparison. Like,
yes, they are.
Well, everything's slow in comparison, but I think seekers are, for 6 points, I don't know why you would ever summon a herald unless you were desperate for a hero. The chariot,
in which case you just stick around for one more point and summon something better, wouldn't you?
Yeah. The seeker chariot, again, it's 6 wounds. It's like, it's okay, but I mean,
it gets to flee and charge, but it has to get in to do that. Again, it's too slow. I just wouldn't be considering stuff that isn't the 5 seekers generally.
Yeah, so the only thing you can do with the chariot is, because it's on like a blobby base, you might better charge somebody, hit multiple units within an inch, and then on a 2+ they take D3 wins, so you could like ping a few units, but to be honest, it's quite hard to do that, and I think I'd just rather have the seekers.
Yeah.
So it's, I'd say they're the standout 6-point choice.
Agreed.
Obviously, demonettes might be worthwhile if you need more models within range of an objective. And
more likely to happen towards the end of the game, I think.
To cap. So, but I don't think you'd be on turn 1 going, oh, let's summon 10 demonettes. You'd be like, why?
Agreed.
Then the next set, you've got like a herald on chariot, a hell flayer, the Enrapturous, a 7, an exalted chariot, and so from that list, the chariots. I think the exalted chariot might be a decent choice.
Yeah, solid.
The war scroll, because they're not on the website, so
it's got a decent amount of wounds, potential for impact hits, large base. It's round though, which is not as good as it being an oval.
Oh no, it's still an oval. It's on exactly the same base as a normal chariot. Yeah, it's really awkward. Well, that's what they come to the start collecting set. So
okay,
it's just you put it sideways and they all hang off the end of it. That's why I don't have it, because I hate the fact it doesn't have the base.
Okay then.
But that's 9 wounds. And one of the things it does have is that obviously, when it finishes a charge, you pick a unit. For each enemy unit within 1, it does the mortal wounds, and then start of the combat phase. For each enemy unit within 1, it takes mortal wounds. It's got both the rules of the Hellflayer and the Seeker Chariot.
Yeah.
So potentially could be quite good for doing multiple wounds across multiple things. it's not bad.
No.
But you do have to build it. So
a key point.
It's a key point for me.
We've already covered the Enrapturous, not a bad option in specific situations, has a ranged attack.
And the good thing is, because she comes in at the end of the movement phase, she can affect the turn she comes on with a shooting attack. It's the only one without needing to make a charge roll that can affect the game.
Yeah, and if your opponent goes first the next turn, because the range on her debuff is 24 inches for opponents casting, it's solid. If your opponent's got some good spells, she's, she could win you a game. So
yeah,
potentially powerful in specific situations.
So I think she's a decent choice, especially if you want a hero. Like, it's worth holding out for her.
Yeah.
So I would say she's one of the ones I would consider.
What do you feel about the 8-point cost ones? Would you summon 3 fiends, or would you just start with them in your army if you wanted them? I feel like if you're in this spectrum, I feel like you're likely to be able to easily get to the 9s or 10s.
I don't think I would summon any of the 9s at any point, really. I know the epitome is okay, but
nah, just wouldn't.
But like your epitome, if you want something very specific, with the, she's quite good because she, she's a hero. You get the cast disruption, you get your double cast, you get the acquiescence. But 9 points is a lot for when one more point you can get 3 Seeker Chariots.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, no. Fiends, I think I might do. Like, it depends on the game. If it's turn 4 and I'm like, I've only got 8 points, would I summon the Fiends, or would I take something underneath that? I might just take 5 Seekers and bank the 2, but then, like, because there's more likely I've got 10 D-minutes for the last turn.
Yeah,
because you lose the points. Normally you're like, I'll just spend all of them because I'm going to lose them all anyway. But now you're like, actually, would I summon 3 fiends?
Or even up to 20 D-minutes. The difference between 10 and 20 D-minutes is very, very small. And if you were after bodies, they also get a bonus if there's 20 or more models in the unit. So if they made a charge and got to go first. I've said if a lot, but if 10 DP for 20 D-minutes is a much better bargain than 6 for 10.
Up, but I'll get them up anyway. I mean, I like fiends, but I think
I like them in my army list.
You put them in your list at a 6, or you don't take them. That's my feeling. So you might summon them if you were like, I really need, because one thing they do have, they are fast and they do have a good combat profile.
They're lone rangers as well. They don't need support. Yeah.
Probably the thing that like is the most fighty, and they do have disruptive songs, so -1 to enemy wizards casted within 12. So they do have a disruption ability on an enemy wizard. So you might put them down within 12, try and make the charge. If you don't charge, then they're going to have a minus to cast on a key spell, maybe. So I won't write them off, but I think it'll be a rare occurrence that they come on the table from a summoning. I think I'd rather have an epitome than fiends. If I was gonna spend 8 points, I'd rather wait and get an epitome or take 5 seekers. In the 10-point bracket, the 3 Seeker Chariot unit is just
great,
awesome. Like, I'd take that. That's 18 wounds, better save, does more
impact stuff.
It's big footprint. I mean, that might be a problem. You might not be able to put it on the table, but 3
Seekers, retreat and charge too, which is a cool ability.
I personally think that is a good spend of 10 points.
Agreed.
I think the only time you summon demonettes is when you want bodies and objectives. And other than that, it's the standouts for me are Keeper of Secrets, which we're going to talk about now, but the Keeper is awesome because it gives you all the stuff. It gives you the command ability, it gives you magic, it's really good in combat, it's fast.
If yours has died, much more seductive than if yours is still alive and fairly healthy, I would say.
I think it almost allows you to recycle your Keeper on turn 3.
Yeah.
Because turn 3 is a more realistic time you're going to get it.
Be a bit suicidal with him. If he's died, he's probably generated points on the way down from him and from other stuff. Yeah, the 30 demonettes for 12, that is a lot of bodies. For that, I could see armies, particularly like the Glutus army or something like that. I could definitely see the potential of a somewhat indestructible wave moving slower than your average Slaanesh army up the table, and then you just dropping stuff behind yourself.
Yeah.
In which case, the stuff that we've perhaps written off as a bit poopy, maybe it just doesn't matter. You know, you've got your stuff in people's grill, munching through them, not taking too much damage in response. Maybe you are just dropping things there, but even then, you know, if you drop 5 Seekers behind you, they've got more flexibility in later turns, or an Enrapturous can shoot and debuff, all that type of stuff.
I think, you know, if you want bodies, demonettes are solid, but I'm not summoning them for anything else other than a screen or collecting.
They're not there for their profile, they're there for their wounds.
No. Yeah. And like for me, like if I have a choice between a keeper and 30 demonettes, I'd rather have a keeper 99 times out of 100, I imagine.
Yeah, they're a bit less sexy when you don't get to put items on them and stuff. They do change a fair bit for that, but it's still a solid profile. And you do get to pick the stuff that is on its scroll.
Yeah.
So you know
the whip or the Aegis or
exactly. Yeah, the Healy hand, the 6-up save, that type of stuff, which is, you know, it's quite cool to summon something and get to kit it out as it drops effectively.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I would point out is that in Godseekers, I believe you get +1 to charge, so that makes your Depravity units coming on and being impactful a little bit more realistic.
What has reroll to charge? Is it Seekers again?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a factor, right? You summon something 9 inches away, especially if you've got +1 to charge, but even without it, having that without having to spend a CP is good. Shout out to Cogs as well.
Yeah. This
right?
obviously got to be an option to think about that, because, I mean, Cogs is good for 2 reasons. 1, you can get a rerollable save on your keeper, and 2, an extra spell. Also, you can get +2 to your summoned units charging. So, yeah, definitely a good shout out that. I think there's definitely some good endless spell shenanigans you can do. I think Demonettes gets to reroll charges as well. Yeah, they do. They got the same banner. So, so
that's a plus to them,
maybe,
for sure.
Yeah, but like I say, like 5 Seekers or 10 Demonettes, I'll go with 5 Seekers. They still get the same rule. Do more damage, I think, on the charge.
I definitely have up to 20 Demonettes available in an ideal world for my summoning pool.
I think if you're playing Pretenders, you might take. I mean, I suppose it doesn't really matter, but yeah, I thought because you get a bonus, but then if you get a bonus if you charge, so it affects everyone, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think from the list, what you're really looking to do is you're trying to think, what do you need next turn?
Yep.
Like, because you could put something 9 away and roll a 9. You might not roll a 9. So if you're in a desperate situation where that is going to be very important, like that is going to make a big difference to the game, that's going to, like, you know, capture that objective, win or lose you the game, it's worth doing. But you need to think, do I need to spend the points this turn? Am I saving for something else? I could legitimately see every turn, if you're fortunate enough to drop a unit of Seekers every turn.
Yeah.
Because I think with
so much flexibility,
6 points a turn, and bearing in mind that's if it's you go, I go, that's 2 turns really. That should be fairly doable, and there'll be turns you'll get more, turns you get less, but the turns you get more, you don't spend those extras, so they bank for next turn. So I think if you're always dropping a unit of 5 Seekers and you're getting a 9-inch rerollable every turn, I think they're a really good option to drip feed for that down.
Getting 6 is effectively like 600 points or something. That's fine. 600 points for free is good, even if they are slightly overpointed. You know, it's fine.
Yeah, but I mean that's partly why the army is a little bit costly.
Exactly.
Because of this. And I think for me, like that makes a lot of sense. That they're more likely to charge, because even if you summoned a keeper on turn 3, that probably means you've summoned nothing for the first 2 turns, or you might summon it at the bottom of turn 2.
Lucky.
But that would be very lucky. And then if you
your army is possibly in a state where it's been decimated enough that you're a bit upset anyway.
Maybe. So, and I think as well, like your turn sequencing is important. So when you decide to take the turn, one of the things you're going to have to think about is how much depravity am I going to have this turn? Do I need to give the turn away to mitigate and then basically make sure I've got more depravity in the next turn, which is going to be more impactful than, depending on what you're doing, what position the board state's in. So I think it's an important thing. It's like a handbrake. You're going to have to anticipate when to apply it. Like, and I think it's really interesting, that resource management, because you're almost like your actions in the turn are going to generate the points that you're going to need to spend next turn. So you need to think, how many points do I need? So if you know I've got 6 points in the bag, I don't need to worry about it. It's like I've got enough for something. And I generally think 5 Seekers is a great choice every time.
To kind of round it up then, what are so for me at least, in terms of depravity, the things that are going in the majority of lists that I have are 2 units that shoot, whether they're the mounted ones or otherwise. A keeper, and then I'll just have a bracket for one other source of flexible damage, whether that's Sigvald in Lurid Haze or something like that, or the Infernal Enrapturous, something along those lines. I'm thinking about that being the first 3 or 4 points of every list that I write.
Yeah, and I think anything that you can use as a screen that can get you points while screening is important. Like, even like Untamed Beasts have got like a shoot attack. So if you move pre-game and they give you the turn, you're able to move and chuck a spear and pip a wound. That's a depravity. They'll probably wipe you out in a runner, so you're not going to get anything back. But you could always sacrifice to the Thane to take a wound to give you 2 depravity if you get the shooting attack off as well. So you can, I think the Thane might only be heroes actually, but I think you can maybe damn terrain or something, or an endless spell. So I think you can use your screen to give you points by pipping it with your own damage. So, but I think you're right. Definitely need 2 units that can reach out and do damage at range. I think you need to have, and that might be a unit that can charge on turn 1 and kill something and not die. And that's just as good. And I think Hellstriders are really good at that, because they're fast. They're able to get there, and also, I mean, even Seekers in your list are good at that, right? So
my list has started off with a unit of Hellstriders, unit of Seekers, 2 units of Shooters, and a Keeper of Secrets frequently.
I think most of mine are double shooters, or 1 unit of like Bliss Barbs, and then it's like 2 units of Hellstriders. I normally have a Keeper, and like you say, like if I'm playing, Sigvald's been a lot of my army list recently. But I think you just need to, in your head, you need to think, what do I need to have in my list, and don't rely on summoning the Keeper.
And the summoning is there to help you have your list do what it's meant to do better, whether that's stalling your opponent, pinning them, going to the objectives, because the best stuff is probably the stuff that you started with. I wouldn't be thinking about it any other way than that.
No, and I think when you summon, it's, do I need to summon something to go and kill something, or do I need to stand on objective, or do I need to be a screen? So you can summon a unit to just block damage coming to another unit. So if you've got like a Keeper of Secrets and you just wrap it with 5 Seekers, it just means they can't get to it, so they can't hit it. But you've got a 3-inch reach, so you immediately make that Keeper a lot more survivable, and it's about protecting him. So you're spending the depravity to protect him. On the Billy bonus, if they go in and don't kill those Seekers, they've got a chance to put some models back in the unit, but you also then get another depravity. They attack, they get more depravity. So I think it's playing the long game. So anything that can, I think for me, with my list, I'm always looking at a thing that can make my units last longer. And that's why Glutus is pretty much in all my lists. Glutus and a Keeper is a staple for most armies. That and Sigvald, and then you've spent like most of your army, 1,000 points down. But it's
At least you didn't have to paint more stuff.
No, then you know, it's 2 units of Seekers, like Stick-Blade Seekers, 2 units of Bliss Barbs, another core unit, maybe Chaos Warriors, and you're basically done. So it's fairly good. I mean, then you go like, I really want a Shard Speaker, but then you start running out of points because the Shard Speaker is 150. Then you think, do I need Glutus? But then you're like, it's good. And then like the Fiend star's pretty good as well. Can't really get around -2 to hit, -1 to wound. It's pretty ridiculous.
Let us know your list below, because we're still enjoying writing them at this point.
But that's basically a little bit of a deep dive on Depravity. So hopefully that was useful if you're playing Hedonites or if you're playing against them. So the key points really is to write your army list with the units you need. Don't rely on summoning them. Write lists that can do damage in turn 1 at range, or be disruptive in your opponent's deployment zone by taking Lurid Haze. Make sure that you have a pool of models available and you're thinking about what you need the following turn rather than what you need now. And make that decision when you take the turn into account, because it does impact it. But also, don't just play a game of trying to get the most Depravity when the game is to win the scenario. So sometimes you just go, well, this is going to win me the scenario. Forget about the fact I can't summon this and I could summon a Keeper next turn. That's irrelevant. So keep your eye on the scenario, but also think about your Depravity resource.
Completely agree.
Okay, so hopefully that was useful for you guys, and thanks for watching the video. Check out our Sigvald video and our other Slaanesh video about the deep dive, or you could go back and check the video about both the Daughters of Cain and the Hedonites of Slaanesh book when we did the reveal on the release pre-order day. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you soon.
Catch you in a bit, guys. Bye.
Bye.